So yeah, today we're going to be talking about SiteScan for ArcGIS. Um, the overall concept of SiteScan is just an end-to-end solution. It is literally encompassing everything you would want out of the drone workflow. So from capturing and planning a flight and then capturing the site itself to uploading the data, to processing the data, to storing the data, analyzing your results, and even sharing all of your results. All of that can be done within SiteScan, no need to depend on anything else. So we are very proud of this particular solution because it encompasses everything that you would expect out of this drone workflow without having to piece different things together to make it work. Now, drones, I think that's one thing that most people tend to wonder about, like why use drones to begin with. And, they just became another tool in the toolbox. They're very commonly used in just about every industry. People wanted higher spatial and spectral resolution on their imagery. People wanted higher temporal resolution. And when you compare drones against other sources of that same type of imagery, manned aircraft, satellite imagery, from a cost standpoint, it just made a lot of sense to have drones implemented into these workflows. It just was simpler to do it this way. So this is part of the reason as to why you would have drones in most types of industries, in most types of captures and projects. It just makes a lot more sense. Now, I think this is a very important slide for two reasons. It not only talks about the advantages of drones in general, but two of them I like to focus on because they refer to the capabilities of SiteScan as a whole. So, the reduced capture time, enhanced data accuracy, reduced operational costs, all of this makes a lot of sense just for drones in general, right? But the gain smarter insights and analysis, that's primarily referring to SiteScan's capability to analyze your data, to perform in-depth analysis or superficial analysis on your processing products. But at the same time, it's also talking about the fact that SiteScan is part of the ArcGIS platform. So if you wanted to leverage maybe the additional analysis tools within ArcGIS Pro, or maybe take the additional analysis capabilities that you would find by implementing Image Server into your enterprise portal, you can do all of that with the data produced in SiteScan. It's just a seamless workflow and process. Plus, if you want to collaborate with other teams, SiteScan is a cloud-based solution. So it's very easy for me to share the data with somebody else. I produced a number of results that I want other people to see. I can invite them to my project. I can send them download links. I can publish it to ArcGIS Online, to an enterprise portal. I can send share links for people to just open up a browser tab on their end and see the results and the measurements that I left behind for them. It's a great tool for sharing purposes. Now, some of the files that you're going to get from SiteScan are these, and these are like the most common files that people would expect, right? You have your orthomosaic images, your 3D point clouds, your elevation models. You also have thermal orthomosaic images. So if you guys ever need to use thermal sensors and maybe measure the temperature off of each point or pixel, you can do that with radiometric sensors. 360 panos, so for visibility purposes, these are great. Most people use them they deploy the drone at different spots on their sites, and it's just a great way to see how things were at that moment from that perspective and do a 360 pano. You can spin around the little model on there as well. Plus, of course, you are also generating inspection-oriented imagery. So that's a particular advantage of having a multi-rotor drone. You can have the drone face one direction and fly in a completely different direction. But in order for you to have inspection-oriented imagery, you need to take advantage of this through specialized flight modes, right? Flight modes that allow you to do this sort of captures, and SiteScan has plenty of those, so we'll talk a little bit about that in just a sec. Now, another thing you can do within SiteScan is the ability to produce MISBI-compliant files. So you're essentially producing the necessary geospatial video log and the video if you decide to record video on a flight. And you can run these files through the video multiplexer tool in ArcGIS Pro. And by doing this, you're essentially merging these two files. Think of having a video where every frame is geo-referenced. So you can see where the drone was looking at any given point, where the drone was flying over, and you can actually see the video side by side against the map. In fact, you can click on any point on the video and have that point be marked on the map underneath, or you could measure things on the video itself. Maybe you're looking at a structure and you want to measure that structure. You can do that directly on the video. So this is really cool functionality. Normally, Disney compliant cameras used to be incredibly expensive, you know, $30,000 to $60,000 a camera. Now you can do that with your tiny DJI drone as long as you fly with the SiteScan flight planning app. So it's a great functionality for you to have in case you need to perform any sort of FMV analysis on your sites as well. Now, this is the overall workflow for SiteScan. You have an end-to-end workflow that takes care of everything. So we started with the planning and capturing of the site itself. We're going to be using the SiteScan flight planning app for this. This is an iOS app made for iPads. It is compatible with around 14 drones, more or less. So you can just select your drone and tell it, this is the area, this is the structure or site that I want to capture. The drone will just take off, capture the site, and then return and land completely on its own. No user input required. And once you actually do that, you upload the imagery over to the SiteScan manager for processing, for storage, and for analysis. So the advantage here is that the SiteScan manager is just a web app, a website that you log into to view all of your results, view all of your processing products and analysis, and measurements that you or your team left in a project. Plus, of course, the SiteScan manager is also the portal that you would use to disseminate the data and collaborate with other teams. So you can invite people over to your projects. You can upload the data elsewhere. You can publish it to ArcGIS Online. You can publish directly to your enterprise portal from SiteScan, or you can just send download links for the files as well. So there's a lot of different ways for you to share all of this data, including the ability to work with the BIM 360 environment from Autodesk. If you ever find yourself within that environment, you can publish data to it and grab data from it as well for QA, QC, maybe some CAD files that you need to use as overlays. You can do all of that within SiteScan as well. Now, as we mentioned, the flight planning app is something that you can use within SiteScan that will allow you to capture very specialized imagery. Worth mentioning, you do not need to use the SiteScan flight planning app. You have access to it, but maybe you don't have a compatible drone. Maybe your drone's a little bit older, or maybe it's a custom-made drone, and that's not an issue. In fact, if you have a drone that's not compatible with the flight planning app, you can still use that drone with its own native capture app. And as long as those images that you're capturing are geo-referenced and they have, you know, proper overlap for you to be able to process them into a usable set of results, you're good to go. You can still upload all of those images into SiteScan and process them and take advantage of all the other features. But if you do have a compatible drone, then you'll be able to use these particular set of features that will allow you to capture even better imagery. So, for example, flight plans, top left corner here, will give you the option to capture, you're essentially creating a flight plan, but you're saving this for offline use, or you're saving this for somebody else within your project. So anybody within your project will be able to access this particular flight plan, and they'll be able to execute it right then and there, which is a great feature. If you're at the office, you can create a flight plan and then someone at the field can load it up and execute it. You never had to leave the office. That's great. And at the same time, you can just save them for offline use for yourself. Maybe there's no internet access at the site. No big deal. You can create the flight plan. You can save it. You can even save the base maps and the terrain data for offline use, and you can still work with flight planning app without internet access. Now we also have other flight modes like your area survey. That's your basic lawnmower pattern you would expect for flat areas or just creating updated base maps in general. It's great, but if you have any sort of structures on there or differences in elevation, you'll notice you'll start missing out on some of that information. For example, that building you guys see on the picture there, we can't really capture the facades of that building because we don't have any oblique imagery. So for something like this, we would then use cross-type survey. It'll do this north, south, east, west type of pattern with an oblique angle. So you're actually capturing facades, differences in elevation, things like that. And it's able to model out a complete site instead of just a single structure. Now, if you wanted to focus on one structure specifically, we have perimeter scan. You literally draw out the shape of the structure you want to capture, and the drone or SiteScan is telling the drone to fly around it at different heights while automatically adjusting the gimbal angle. So it's doing this on its own and without having to, the pilot no longer needs to think about this particular aspect. Tends to be a little bit harder to do, and you will take care of that altogether. It's a really useful tool as well. Plus, of course, if you had maybe a wall, maybe you just want to capture the side of the structure, or a mine wall, a dam wall, anything like that, you can do that through the SiteScan flight planning app as well. But the cool thing is that instead of actually flying over the structure or area, you can fly directly next to it, left to right, up and down. So this will literally capture facades and things like that. It's a great tool just to model out something with a lot more detail and then also produce inspection-oriented imagery unlike you've never seen before by flying literally right next to the structure completely autonomously. So it's a great functionality as well. Even if you had any slope to the structure itself, like think of the inside of a football stadium, right? You can just add any slope you want to this and have the drone follow that and then automatically adjust the gimbal angle as it's changing heights. But of course, there's other functionalities you would expect, like terrain follow using a corridor scan. So if you wanted to follow something like a road, you can just have SiteScan take care of that. It'll just fly over the road. Plus, if you enable the terrain follow functionality, which can be enabled for all of our flight modes, you can have the drone just change heights as it's doing this. So in this case, it will just have consistent ground sampling distance or resolution essentially throughout the whole capture, even though you have prominent differences in elevation on the site itself. So SiteScan is taking care of that for you already. So that'll help you out. But sometimes you can't really fly over this corridor-like areas like the road because the FAA does not allow you to fly over moving vehicles. So maybe you do this. You literally just tell the app, hey, don't fly over the road that I want to capture, but I still want to capture the road. And so what happens is that the SiteScan app automatically has the drone fly on the sides of the road, fly at two different heights, and it'll fly sideways with different gimbal angles, by the way. So the only thing the pilot had to do was just tell the app, I cannot fly over the road, and then SiteScan just took care of the calculations that were needed to be able to do this, like still capture it without directly flying over it. So there's a lot of really cool functionality in here as well, including, the 360 panels that we talked about earlier, where you just tell the drone, hey, this is my spot, this is where I want to go, and it'll just show you where it'll focus on, but also it'll just show you the 360 panel that you'll be generating as well. It's a great functionality. Now, something else that a lot of people focus on is just how can I leverage existing assets? If I want to use an ortho map that I created, maybe even a point cloud or a mesh file, you can do that within SiteScan. So in this case, we're creating a vertical scan for a Radcliffe camera over at Oxford University. This is the example that we have on our screen here. But this is a complex capture. You can see there's a lot of buildings in that ortho map. So by bringing in an existing 3D mesh file like this, we can actually take advantage of existing assets and know exactly where the structure itself is, but also where the surrounding potential obstructions are. So we can safely avoid the other buildings, the trees, and things like that, while at the same time accurately capturing the structure. So this will help us a lot as well. So the 3D flight planning capabilities within SiteScan, and you combine them with the ability to bring in existing assets, orthos, mesh files, 3D point clouds, design files, ground control point locations, things like that. You can just bring them in, use them as reference, accurate flight plans, accurate captures, better results in the end. Now, this is a quick example of flight planning in the app. This, I think in general, the overall concept is already very clear. Shaping the polygon is pretty simple. You can enable terrain follow just to have this sort of functionality built into the platform so that, again, you have that consistent ground sampling distance. You can even monitor and edit this both from a 3D perspective or a 2D perspective. And once you go through all of this, you can then save the flight plan, as we mentioned, for offline use or for anybody else that has access to this particular project. Once you do that, you can download the base maps for offline use. Even the terrain data will be available for offline use as well. And once you do all of this, you can load up your flight plan. You can inspect it, before takeoff, making sure everything's okay. And if you're ready to go, you will have to go through this pre-flight checklist. This is actually available to all pilots. You can determine whether or not you want to enable this checklist, but it's completely customizable. So your pilots will have to go through this on their own, and all of their answers are automatically saved for the administrators of the organization. Plus, you have your pre-flight checklist, checking all the sensors on the drone before taking off. And of course, once you actually take off, this is a seamless and autonomous process altogether. So no user input required. As you can see, the drone can be monitored from a 2D or a 3D perspective, or even from the drone's actual perspective until it finishes, and then it'll just return to the takeoff point and land completely on its own. Now, we mentioned earlier that the app does not need internet access to view your data to work on the field, so you can take advantage of this by inspecting your imagery right on the iPad. But if you do have internet access, you can use that and upload your imagery right from the site over to the SiteScan Manager, the web app, where you will process your data, analyze it, share it, all of that. We'll talk about that in just a sec. Before I move on, though, does anybody have any questions on the flight planning aspects of SiteScan? Data collection, whether or not it can be used in a specific scenario? Good deal. Okay, let's move on. Well, what do you do after you capture the site, right? So you move on over to the SiteScan Manager, which is our web app. As we mentioned, this is just a web application, a website that you log into. So no need for you to download or install anything on your computer for you to be able to use these results and the images and the analysis tools or all of this stuff. This is just on a web app. In fact, it offers a complete suite of analysis tools built into it, as well as collaboration tools that allow you to share the data, invite people over, or publish that to ArcGIS Online, your enterprise portal, or maybe even BIM 360 from Autodesk. Now you have unlimited cloud processing and storage built into SiteScan. So you do not need to worry about storage caps. You do not need to worry about how much you're processing. There are no credits associated with any of this. You can use it as much as you want. You also have secure US hosting. So all of your data is secure and encrypted, of course, while stationary and while in motion. So you can be rest assured that your data is safe. Now, this is just a web app, but it will allow you to bring up your 3D results. So if you wanted to inspect your point clouds, you can do that. If you wanted to inspect your mesh files, you can do that. In fact, you can even leverage the analysis tools built in for 3D environments. So you can actually measure the area of a vertical surface if you needed to, or you can measure the height and angle of things like that. In this 3D environment, you can even bring in CAD files for QA, QC, or just take advantage of the fact that it is on a web app and you can share this with other people. So they no longer need to have either a specialized computer to render this, nor do they need to have the specialized software to be able to open this. Anybody with a web browser can open it up, can see it, can analyze it, can view the measurements you left behind for them. So all of that is readily available. It even has some computer vision-based functionality where if you guys are using correction data, like ground control points, for example, SiteScan can find and tag these for you, or it'll add the bare minimum. If you don't want to go through this, you can have them highlighted for you so you can find them and tag them yourself if you feel more comfortable with that. So it's a great process. It can save you a lot of time and it'll take care of that. It'll automatically produce that quality report in the end that allows you to gauge the overall quality that you're working off of. Plus, it works with RTK and PPK corrected imagery as well. So if you're using either one of those types of systems, you can still bring in that imagery, and SiteScan will take care of using that additional correction information to increase and improve your overall positional accuracy as well. Now we're also introducing the SiteScan, the Sure 3D Mesh engine from N-Frames. And as you can see, there's a very big difference between the mesh engine at the top and the mesh, the mesh file at the top and the mesh file at the bottom. So the one at the top is what we're currently producing. And in my opinion, when I first saw that, I felt, oh, this is great. This looks amazing. Look at the quality of that texture map. It looked really good, but when you look at the one at the bottom, it's night and day. It's kind of like a picture almost, but it is also a 3D mesh file. And this was produced with the same set of images. It was just processed in a different processing engine, which will be implemented into SiteScan in the coming months as well. Everybody will have access to it as well. But as you can see, it's using a different process altogether, so it's creating higher resolution texture maps for your overall 3D mesh file, so you can actually zoom in and see the details without having to go outside and inspect images individually. Now, this is a quick demo of the SiteScan Manager. This is your world map view where you have all your projects distributed across a map, or you can go to the list view and find the project that you want. This is the same one from the video that we saw a moment ago. And so in this project, what we can do is we can click on any point, have the preview of the picture itself show up, or open up the full resolution version of that image. We can zoom in on the actual high resolution ortho image that we created. Or we can use our elevation data and have it overlaid on top of each other, so we can have like our elevation model along with our elevation contours, our labeled contours, and just see the difference between them. We can have side-by-side comparisons just to see how our site has evolved over time using this particular tool. You have the ability to go into the 3D environment. Like in this case, we are analyzing the point cloud, and we are able to determine, what's the height difference between 2 points. They measure areas, volumes, heights, angles, a lot of things like that. Even an elevation profile line, if we wanted to do that right here, we can do just that. In fact, the tiny point cloud at the bottom can also be exported individually if we needed to work with that elsewhere. You're able to download all of these results. There's a lot more on that list, by the way. Download them from SiteScan, or you can publish them directly to ArcGIS Online or your enterprise portal, depending on how you log into the system. You also have the ability to inspect the 3D mesh file right within SiteScan, and as I mentioned, this one already looks great in my opinion. It's very detailed. It's just going to get way better down the road. But if you wanted to perform like some more complex analysis within SiteScan, you can do just that. So maybe you're interested in surface comparison. So we can do like a cut fill analysis against a specific type of surface. This could be another flight. This could be a custom surface file, like in this case, and then have SiteScan automatically highlight and color code areas within specific thresholds that we find of interest. Plus, if we wanted to check this in 3D instead of 2D, we can actually do that as well and pivot over to the 3D environment and see exactly what SiteScan is measuring and how it's giving us those cut, fill, and net volume measurements that it's providing, right? This will give you that ability so you can even manipulate the polygon in real time and then have SiteScan automatically show you the difference while re-rendering everything in real time as well. So it's a great functionality just to make sure that you're able to measure exactly what you want and then compare it against what you needed to compare it against. It's a very complex functionality built right into a web browser. Now, you also have the ability to, as we mentioned earlier, for inspection purposes, click on any point, both on the orthomosaic image or the 3D point cloud. Have SiteScan automatically bring up all the images that contain that point, and then you're able to create PDF reports from all of this imagery, pin pictures to those points, add any nodes to the point itself. So there's a lot of functionality for inspection purposes built into this as well. And in general, you have the ability to just work with the system in SiteScan, but it just works very well with the rest of the ArcGIS platform. So, you produced a lot of results already within SiteScan, and maybe you just want to leverage the additional analysis tools within Pro. You can do that because all of the files produced in SiteScan are compatible. What about maybe working with an ArcGIS Online or your enterprise portal along with image server? You can do just that as well. Or maybe you want to have the data produced in SiteScan show up on some of your field apps or have a web app that you created and then showcase that on a dashboard. And if all of that contains data from SiteScan, no problem at all. They're just compatible with one another. And that's part of the concept here, where what you create in SiteScan is great, but it doesn't have to stay within SiteScan. You can work outside of this particular platform and go into the rest of the ArcGIS platform, or you can work outside of the ArcGIS platform altogether. You can download all of the files from SiteScan and they can be ingested by any software that's compatible with those file formats. And by the way, it is producing a lot of commonly used file formats. So you have your orthomosaic files in TIFF format, you're generating DXF files, shape files, LAS files, OBJ files. So a lot of very commonly used file formats are generated in SiteScan. So you can work, again, within the ArcGIS platform, but also outside of the platform. There's a couple of examples of that collaboration. So this is on the background, we have the SiteScan app automatically, you're flying the drone manually, but the quick capture app from Esri is automatically keeping track of the position of the drone. So the boundary being created by where the drone is positioned at any given point is being saved. So this is now a feature layer that can be added to a map, scene, and you can work with it elsewhere as well. Or, if you wanted to showcase some of your information that you produced in SiteScan, like, maybe your 3D mesh file or the orthomosaic image you have on the right. So things like that you may want to show off to other users, maybe through an app that you build in a dashboard, you can do that as well. And this is just to show how the data produced in SiteScan it can just be used anywhere else within the ArcGIS environment and platform at all, right? So that is kind of the point. If you produce the data here, it does not have to stay here. It can go outside. It can play very well with other systems, and you can take advantage of the accuracy of this data for additional analysis as well. That's kind of the concept of SiteScan, an end-to-end solution that will take care of all aspects of the drone workflow, but it just plays very well with any other workflow or any other system, helping you enhance it, helping you improve it, and sometimes maybe even replacing them. So you have the option and the choice on your own. And that's about it from the SiteScan side. Do you guys have any questions? Anything you'd like me to answer or focus on, or a specific workflow you'd like to see?